Well, good morning, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Greetings from the downstairs of my house. If you hear any background noise, it's my wife working upstairs in my house. She's working for Southwest Airlines and has for the past sort of decade or so. And so we're having a lot of fun between us working in two highly affected industries during all of this COVID-19 stuff. So what I'm going to do is run you through just a quick overview of who we are, what we do, how we approach it, and a quick word on the future. I do have relatively limited time today, as I'm sure a lot of you do, but when the team at PSFK ask if you're going to jump on something, you have to do it and be supportive. And so very keen to share as much as I can. And thanks to the team at PSFK for having me. So with that, I will jump into what I believe. All right, so Neighborhood Goods was founded back in 2017, which is sort of crazy to say at this point. I met up with a guy called Mark Macinta, who's a prominent personality in the sort of retail real estate universe. I had started a nonprofit of sorts called Unbranded here in Texas, where we provide free retail and event space to independent entrepreneurs, artists, chefs, every holiday season, amongst a few other projects. But that one in particular had gotten a lot of attention, and we had ended up becoming the sort of first ever physical platform for a lot of brands that are much bigger now, like Ministry of Supply, Mizzen & Main, The Citizenry, all sorts of others. And we were able to bring people to this sort of area in Dallas in particular that people hadn't really visited before. And so we sort of went off on this direction of, what it would look like to develop a platform where people had a much different relationship to a physical space than they would a typical store, but it still was obviously very transactional. And so when Mark and I teamed up back in 2017, he was working on a development in Plano called Legacy West, which is now our first location. They had a food hall at one end of the development. He felt quite strongly that they should have something similar to sort of bookend the other end of the development. And he was very motivated to have nothing to do with running it, but was very motivated that something like that should exist. And so I stepped in and started to develop it. And so the high level sort of overview, we describe ourselves as being a new type of department store. It's relatively inaccurate, and we'll get into some images in a second. But the general perspective is that we've created fixed physical spaces where all sorts of different brands can come into that room to accomplish a broad variety of different goals. So from tiny sort of independent local brands that need a platform to direct to consumer brands that are trying to diversify their customer acquisition efforts, to larger brands that are trying to sort of do something more playful, test a new strategy for their own stores, to deploy a different marketing channel and otherwise. And so we now have 3 locations. Our first one opened in Plano in November 2018. Our second opened in New York in December of last year. We took the entrance to Chelsea Market. And then our third opened for about 24 hours in Austin, Texas, before we closed all 3 of our stores in response to COVID-19. And so across those 3 stores, we're now working with about 125 different brands of all different types and sizes. And so what they're able to do is, we're capturing a huge amount of data in the room. We're also the staff, the point of sale. We provide the design and fixtures and core sort of aspects of that physical space. So for them, if they want to come in and sell product as you would typically, you can do so quite easily. If you want to come in and acquire customers or capture data, you can also do so, and so on and so forth. So the way it works is brands essentially pay us a fixed fee per month to be in the room, and they either make 100% of what they sell, or we take a percentage and a lesser fee. We handle the staff, as I mentioned. We handle the design, as I mentioned. We handle the data capture, as I mentioned. And so what it's looked like historically has been weekly reporting from us every Monday, where you have sort of someone from our team here in Dallas and 1 or 2 in New York that coordinate with you as a brand. And depending on what your goal set is, we'd historically been sending reporting every Monday that would include sales, inventory, things of that nature. Just in the past few weeks, we've been rolling out a new digital platform that does all of that in real time for our brands. So they can have a quick glance across how they're doing at each store, whichever one they're open in, how they're doing on our digital channels, what it looks like from a traffic perspective, demographic perspective. They can generate their own inventory reports and otherwise. And so it's become a very real-time relationship where we can have this really dynamic way of interacting with people. So that's been a newer sort of aspect for us, where it was very much in response to this idea that in the early days, we were capturing so much data, we assumed that by default was going to be the critical aspect of the whole relationship. But for a lot of the brands we worked with, whether they were young or much more sophisticated, many of them hadn't been in physical retail before. So talking about traffic and the general sort of conversion rate to their space was interesting, but it didn't necessarily mean that much. And so what we found was really important was getting the data to them in a way that was very, very simple and very, very sort of automated, and unlocking our time as a team on the other end to be a much more human sort of aspect and layer of insight around it. So it's become a very intimate and close relationship with all of our brands. And the interesting thing as a result is that in 2019, our model is predicated upon brands being with us for a relatively short period of time. We had always assumed that brands would come in and be with Neighborhood Goods for anywhere from 3 to 6 months on average. When we launched in Plano, we had 24 brands at launch. That location now has about 60 active brands. And the interesting thing is, between that location and New York in 2019, we worked with about 104 brands total. And we ended the year still working with about 90 of them. So we actually didn't have very many brands leave at all, which was not the plan whatsoever. Now what's been interesting is seeing these brands manifest across all 3 locations in varying different ways, just as much as we're also starting to get brands, particularly during this sort of period of sort of upheaval, that are wanting to work with us exclusively from a digital perspective. So just to sort of touch on the locations we do have to give you a visual sense and ground what this looks like. So we have 3 locations. This is the exterior of our first location in Plano. This is what it looked like on our launch day in November 2018. So as I say, about 24 brands inside. We have our own restaurant inside as well. We host in this location about 2 to 3 events per week. And then we've started to sort of really sort of instill different areas in the space that allow for people to sort of really come, relax, sit around, stay. And so we have a dwell time that's typically on an average month last year approaching 40 minutes in this location. And so we've got, as I say, about 60 brands there now. And it's anything from brands just in the past couple of months like Kiana, all the way across to brands like Tonal, to we've had longtime partners like Buck Mason, Stadium Goods, Atoms just launched with us. You can see Tushin right here in the frame. We've got about 20 to 30 different health, wellness, beauty brands. Hill City by Gap is there. Fairty is there. Mac Weldon is there. Rothy's has been a ridiculous success for us, and they've been there for quite some time. And then we've been doing really interesting partnerships with brands like Fossil as well, where they've been launching different brands with us every month. This is our new location in New York, relatively new. So right at the entrance to Chelsea Market. So on the left-hand side of the screen there, you can see the main entrance to Chelsea Market on 9th Avenue. We're immediately to the right of it. And so we've got about 7,500 feet here. The interesting thing is that, we've always thought of location a little bit differently than what would be typical in this industry. So it's less about sort of the name of the place and much more about the functions and features of a given location, as that may befit different goals for different brands. So this location, where Plano's 14,000 feet, brands have, as you can sort of see in the background of this, you can see they have sort of their own distinct areas for some of them. Here, it's much more of a blended boutique sort of feeling. I apologize, this image isn't great, but I just pulled it together at the last minute. But, we have in this location today approaching 50 brands. So it's, in terms of active retail space, this is about well, it's less than 50% of the active retail space we have in Plano, but actually quite a similar amount of brands. So you can see Fossil in the frame, Fairty's in the frame. So some of these brands that we've had in multiple locations manifesting in very different ways. So our location in Chelsea sort of reads a little bit like a boutique of sorts. So for brands, they can sort of open up with us in Plano and have a distinct area where they can go and activate in a suburban area, whereas here in New York, it's much more around activating in front of probably already quite a qualified audience that are already familiar with it, in addition to a tourist audience. And so at the back, you can't really see it, but right at the back of this image, we have our own grocery sort of area we did with Pop-Up Grocer, who's been an amazing partner. We've got another restaurant concept that we did that's unique to our New York location. And as I say, sort of changing all the time. We've been sort of learning our way into event cadence in the New York location and otherwise, but it's been really special so far. The really fun one is Austin. So this is on South Congress in Austin. It was open for less than 24 hours before we shut all 3 of our stores in response to COVID-19. So this is just over 10,000 square feet in a new development. So we are the anchor retailer of this development. So it's us predominantly on the ground floor. So most of the glass you can see on the ground is us. The 2 floors above us is Equinox. It's their first location in Austin. Immediately next door, just out of the frame, is going to be the first Soho House in Texas. And you've got, Sweet Green moving in next door. You can sort of see Lululemon's hoarding windows up just beyond, Everlane, a number of others. So it's a really amazing little development. We pushed to sort of get this development over and finished and all the construction wrapped up so that we wouldn't be in a position where we were sort of on the hook from a construction perspective during the sort of period of shutdowns. And so we pushed and got this done, and the result is really beautiful. So the only thing that's unfinished in this image, which I just shot on my phone, so I apologize if it's not great, but the bar directly in front of us, it's a new version of the bar we did and restaurant we did in Plano, prim and proper. So that was not open yet, and this is actually unfinished. So you can sort of see this concrete bar going all the way around it. That will actually go, it'll be curved onto the bar top itself, and it'll be concrete below. You can kind of see still a lot of dust and otherwise, but just to sort of give you at a glance, like we've always been really fond of having our geometric shapes in the background. You've sort of seen them on some of these title slides I've been using today. And so we've got those sort of embedded into a feature wall at the back, which you can see on the right-hand side of this image. It's lit up. It's actually a functional wall, so it's got brands built into it. This one launched with just over 50 brands for a very short period of time. So again, brands like Toshin, brands like Fossil, brands like Hill City, brands like Tonal. But we've also introduced a lot of really mainstream ones like Aesop, or I'm told it's actually pronounced Aesop, and we've all been getting it wrong for quite some time. We've got brands like Laline in the sort of luxury space. And then we've had brands like Modern Citizen and a number of others carry on with us. Atoms is here. Baboon to the Moon was a new one to the ecosystem. Entire World, you can sort of see. So this location isn't entirely finished, but we got it largely done, and we'll be hoping to reopen it soon for all of you to come and visit as soon as you're able. So on that note, it would be crazy not to acknowledge the current sort of circumstance we're all in. It's a trying time for everyone in the industry. I would say that for us looking ahead, we see a lot of opportunity on the other side of this. We've certainly been getting a lot of outreach from landlords about what we can do on the other side to fill some potentially vacant space they're looking at. And we've been fortunate to have a lot of brands that, have been thinking about what physical retail looks like for them, and now may be a little bit more hesitant to do so. And so for us, it's a lot of near-term sort of pain and struggle, and for everyone really. And so, what I would say to all of you as sort of a parting word is just, if anyone is in need of anything, wants to chat, anyone's having a tough day or trying to think through anything, please feel free to reach out. You can find me on all sort of typical social networks, or it's matt@neighborhoodgoods.com. I'm always happy to chat. I've had lots of founders reaching out to me, from anything from brands to other retailers, just wanting to chat. And, I think that's really important in this time, is that, maybe the silver lining of us all being quite distant from each other and not having our stores open to the public may actually allow for us to all come together a little bit more. We remain open for business on our app and online, which has been really fun. All a portion of proceeds from e-commerce transactions on our website go towards the COVID-19 response fund. We actually have a number of brands that are signing up with us during this time to be digital only. And so we'll be launching more there. And then we're certainly thinking about some other bits and pieces to be doing as well. I don't have loads of time for Q&A, but I'll have a quick look over these questions and see what I can answer quickly. So in terms of how we capture data inside the physical space, question from S. Donovan, we use Retail Next cameras for the most part to capture data inside the room, which has been really effective for us. So it captures demographics, traffic, and otherwise throughout the space. And then we also develop some of our own technology as well in terms of how we sort of look at Bluetooth in the room. So we have a neighborhood goods app. So if you are not in New York, Dallas, or Plano, or Austin, if you opened it in, for argument's sake, LA or London, it would just read as a very sort of editorial e-commerce app. We are doing more and more editorial these days, certainly in this environment. And so it works that way. But as soon as you come into that store, leveraging the Bluetooth inside the room, it allows for us to understand where you are inside the room. So if you're sitting at one of our restaurants and you decide you want to buy a pair of Rothy's from across the room, we can actually bring them right to your location, which opens up a lot of things for us to play with. Monica asked how we select brands to feature in our stores. The very brief version there is that there's not a huge amount of science to it. Well, there's science, but it's a real balance between sort of the art and science of our industry, which is obviously a big sort of debate I think all of us are engaging in. For us, we look at certainly whether a brand we believe will be successful inside the store and otherwise. We certainly look at whether or not we believe they are going to be relevant for a given market. But a lot of it for us is just whether or not we buy into and believe in the brand. And so it has very little to do with like whether you've raised money or not, but much more to do with just who you are as a brand, what you stand for, whether we believe it will resonate with our customers. And so that's why we have this real mix between tiny sort of upstart brands that are launching with us for the first time in physical, as well as much more established brands as well. So that's been really special. We have lots of people applying for that. And then in terms of the brands we have, Jane asked, I noticed that some of your brands also have their own stores and sell in conventional department stores. Can you tell us a bit about how they see neighborhood goods footprint fitting into their broader ecosystem? So the quick answer there is that we are seen to be quite complementary to what brands do elsewhere. So we have brands that may have a store in immediate proximity to one of our locations, but they still want to be inside with us, because if you're going into one of their stores, like if Tonal, for argument's sake, they're a pretty good example in this world. So Tonal's been doing ridiculously well with us since joining. For them, so it's an exercise hardware company. They're rolling out a few more of their own stores and showrooms. But even if we were in immediate proximity, if you were going to go into a Tonal store, they would have had to spend some money to get you into the room in the first place. Whereas if you come in to a neighborhood goods to come eat and check it out and sort of have more of a general experience there, you have a higher likelihood of being exposed to that brand, and then hopefully then going online, researching it or what have you. And so that's obviously been significant. Beyond that though, I mean, for us, we are able to sort of quickly overhaul and modify the space. We're not operating on a wholesale basis, so it's really nimble and agile for all the brands involved. You couple that with the data capture aspect of it, and it just means that we can be a much broader and much more sort of useful tool in a lot of different regards for testing, understanding, and sort of really sort of getting closer to your customer than just having your own store in one area. And so certainly I think we'll start to see more brands that have activations with neighborhood goods that open stores in the immediate proximity, which I see as sort of an opportunity for us. But if anything, we would see that as a good endorsement of what we've been doing. And so there's more and more there. I think what we've seen with larger brands like Fossil that have, a few hundred of their own stores, is that what they're doing with neighborhood goods is much more built around, what they're doing to sort of capture a different audience than what they would typically get in their own stores. Whereas brands like Fairty and Mack Weldon and Atoms, for them, it's about sort of getting after a customer that they have in a really strong sense online, but haven't been able to access physically. And then these days, increasingly, it's about brands wanting to see what they can sort of, for the next few months, do to sort of capture a little bit more attention and drive more business online as well. And so that final question is, what sort of percentage or contributing element is digital in terms of our sales? And the answer is right now 100%, obviously. Historically, it's always been meaningful, and it's actually been growing quite significantly organically. We never wanted to really acknowledge or emphasize our digital platform that much. A lot of our brands in the early days, I think, would have said they felt a little bit sort of apprehensive of that sort of aspect. And so with that, we wanted to be really mindful of not promoting it in a way that sort of came across as being sort of potentially cannibalistic of what they're doing online. That's been a real sort of pitfall for a lot of these brands that have tested relationships with department stores, is that, the 101 of working with a younger brand is you don't advertise using their search terms on Google. You don't advertise using their products on Facebook or otherwise. But a lot of them have had that sort of experience on a relatively negative basis. So for us, it's been important to sort of go the opposite direction and just be very supportive. And so obviously now it's one of those things where we've been really, really, really fortunate that we've always been investing sort of quietly in digital, certainly to sort of enable a lot more in store and from a BOPIS perspective, but certainly as well to allow brands, well, to allow consumers really to ostensibly dictate their own terms as to how they transact with us. And so that's obviously come around and really benefited us while we've closed the doors. And so we're going to continue to do more and more there. The editorials we've been doing have been really popular. And even for brands that we don't necessarily have stock of, we're likely going to be pushing affiliate efforts to drive business for them as well at this time, so they can continue to be supported. But there's more and more for us to do there. So that's really it from me at the moment. What I would say again is obviously a really sort of trying time for many retailers out in the world. So if any of you are in need of a sort of a supportive ear, just to chat, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, for us, we'll really look forward to seeing you when we will reopen. Otherwise, we're open for business online between now and then. And we'll be adding more brands, more products just about every week, alongside a lot of really fun editorial we've been doing in our Only Good Things series, which has been to sort of provide a little bit of much needed positivity at this time. Obviously be safe, be good to the people around you, and I'll hope to see you at the next PSFK event in person. But that's it from me. Thank you so much for tuning in.